Shall we get started?
Madam Mayor, just before you start, Councillor Solomon gave an apology.
What?
Just let me know he wasn't going to be there.
Simon?
Councillor Solomon.
Solomon. Oh, Solomon. Okay. No. I don't know.
You have more quality time with us, Brian.
You have more time with these two staff members. Yeah. Okay. I'd like to get started. So we would like to acknowledge the land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for the Kaurna people, and that we respect their spiritual relationship with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Greater Adelaide region, and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. So, UDF review update, 21st January 2025. I'd like to say that the mobile phones can be turned off. Yes. And I'll hand over to Andrew. Thank you.
Bring it closer. This will be a bit of a tag team exercise between Wendy and myself. I will, however, largely take the PowerPoint as read, so I'll probably just skim through it to give us more quality time for you to ask us the tough questions, which is fine. Richard sends his apologies because he's had a prior engagement, so you've got Wendy and me. Hopefully we'll do it justice. Just a bit of a background. Late last year, we had a range of projects that went through council of a very significant strategic nature. So we had the growth framework, the integrated transport strategy, largely driven by Wendy's team, and a whole lot of work we were thinking about in terms of, I guess, the Cuddler area and some structure planning principles. And if you recall, going back slightly further in time than that, when we did the budget for 24-25, we had money set aside to do the first part of the urban design framework review. But I guess having had the briefing on Concordia late last year and a number of issues flying around, including some issues to do with traffic management on the ground, and of course over Christmas, New Year period, the colourful experience of the truck removing the awning, I thought it was probably a good time for us to catch up in January while it's still fresh in our mind and talk about what we need to do moving forward. That's the preamble. All right. I think that's pretty given, you know where Gawler is. But moving forward, so as we talked about, there's money set aside in the budget for this year, and there was an expectation to spend money next year, 25, 26 as well. But to paraphrase it really, the bottom line is that we need to do more work on traffic interventions on the ground. If you go back to the Gawler integrated transport strategy, it did identify things like High Street, a number of other issues which we need to look at. And of course, in recent times, we've been debating Edith Street and so forth, but you can't deal with individual road matters without looking at the network. So we haven't really been in a rush, I guess, at an administrative level to spend money on something which we think needs to be rescoped. So we've been rescoping it and not committing money which needs to be further reflected upon in terms of how we deliver the best outcome to the community. Some of the timelines and some of these are projects that Wendy's delivered. I'm happy, Wendy, if you want to talk about, I guess particularly 2021, the Walker Place upgrade is probably the most recent major development of the UDF.
Well, I mean, I think it's probably important to note that we've been delivering on the main street from a very civil infrastructure perspective for nearly a decade, and I think we're up to a good $15 million worth of investment. A good chunk of that has been through grant funding, so I think the council has positioned itself well in most of those projects. I guess Walker Place is one of the, well, it was the second to last because we also did Murray Street Stage 7, which was from Steinborners across the bridge up to Mitre 10. But Walker Place was certainly that major upgrade where the concept of the heart of the town centre concept was trying to be embraced. I think we got part the way there. I think conceptually the thinking was right. How it's actually been used on ground is probably another thing we need to explore. But we've certainly done, out of that 2016 framework, a lot of effort from council's perspective, but again, very much in that civil street infrastructure. The remainder of the actions, or the largely uncovered actions, are the strategic and planning actions. And I'll pass back to you, Andrew.
Yep. So I guess it needs to be said that there are some things that need reviewing and some things that need perhaps looking at in a different way. And even going back to the first page of the presentation, which you've seen, yes, I was getting carried away with clip art, but effectively I was looking at the town centre in three different lenses. There's the lens of supply and demand economy in terms of how the place functions in a retail sense. There's this element of it being a place where people do business and engage, they have events, and it's the social hub, if you like. And then there's the access and place aspect, which is the movement of people around, how that works. And I think the more we looked at it, the more we came to the conclusion that there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the UDF, other than the fact that it didn't get implemented and probably doesn't have code amendments attached to it. What's really missing is some sort of delivery framework as to what are our priorities over the 10 years. How do we resolve the hierarchy of needs? You know, do we spend money on Edith Street or do we spend money on a high street? You know, how do we deal with the truck movements in the town? And some of those, as we said before, are connected to Concordia and other things. But we need to get to the level of what is the detail and how do we deliver it. Now, we've already talked about Concordia and how fundamentally that will affect a whole lot of things, including how you get across Murray Street, ultimately whether you end up closing off a number of side roads. And again, you're familiar with all those issues, so I won't go into much more detail on that. I guess it's also fair to say that with the quantum of growth the government's talking about, that some of the needs for us to deal with the main street are probably more pressing now than they've ever been, but I think it needs to be on the right terms. There was an announcement in the last few weeks about $150 million being spent at two wells, as you know. Realistically, Concordia will be 2 to 3 times bigger than that in terms of the scale of investment there, and there's investment in a whole lot of other towns. So again, it's about how to do sympathetic development relevant to the town. I don't think that issue has gone away from our previous conversations. And I don't think we wanted to do the project over 2 years. So what I've basically just talked about is the issue of risk, and I'm happy if Wendy wants to just talk about risk in that sense from a procurement point of view, or we can move on.
I can talk about it now, but I'll probably come back to it again. I think with a project of this nature, which needs to have a high level of community engagement, and obviously a high level of business engagement, but also the broader community, because, you know, particularly when we take into account like some of the posts that have been coming through, Cody, some of your recent like social media, you know, people want plazas and you know, one-way streets, and other people don't want one-way streets and other people don't want plazas. So, you know, what is it that we actually want the heart to look like? I think everyone can concur that it should be the heart. But with a project like that, we need that level of engagement. To do it over 2 years starts to create that very long, drawn-out process where you're going to either frustrate people because it will feel like they're inputting and nothing's actually coming out of it, or they just get completely fatigued and switch it off. So instead, given this is the heart of the town, we want to make sure that we can get people in, get the sentiment collected, consolidated, and then refine that into what that might look like on ground practically. So then people start to understand, well, then what might the investment look like? What might the delivery program look like? And you're actually having something tangible, albeit still a plan, but tangible on paper, which is better than not tangible on anything, that the community can look at. And we know then how we can also start planning forward. I think, again, to do it out over 2 years where we start to then look at anything we want coming out of this being in 27-28 financial year, it's just stretching it out and out and out. We won't actually understand how we prioritise this, the urban heart of our town, over other interventions.
As a state.
when would we actually see anything on the ground? Because the long-term financial plan looks at the next 9 years doing a whole lot of asset renewal. That's what we're going to focus on. That's what we agreed to. So then you've got this list of all these other things, tens and 20, $30 million for this and blah blah blah. When does this all happen? I mean, you can talk as much as we like, and then from what Cody's been getting back, I mean, it's exactly what people have been saying to me for 14 years. When does the rubber hit the road and we actually solve the problems with traffic in our town? Because at the moment, it doesn't look like there's any solutions. It's probably 30 years. I mean, people are going to leave by then. I mean, it's the cars that are at Paris, basically.
Yeah. So I think the traffic volume question is one that's not going to be solved in the blink of the eye, because that is dependent on much larger interventions from state government. However, some of the interventions that can create, I guess, that, again, the urban centre environment and aesthetic are actually contained within activities that are within the long-term financial plan. So, for example, footpath renewal on Whitelaw Terrace and Julian Terrace. We already have quite well-developed designs for those, and they would fit into the footpath renewal budget, maybe with an element of upgrade, which would start to, depending on what the outcomes of this study would start to create maybe a riverbank precinct. So you can tweak what your footpath looks like on Julian Terrace to create cafe, riverside ambience. For example, I'm just putting that out there as an example. Another good one is High Street. So High Street has got a number of traffic and structural issues on it, and certainly when it comes to things like aligning that with our accessibility strategy, our walking and cycling strategy, the renewal of High Street actually comes up very high in priority. So within the LTFP and the activities within the renewals, there are sub-elements of quite a lot that would come in to address the type of things that would come out of this urban design framework. I'm not saying it's all of it, and there would be elements of upgrade that would have to come into it, because straight renewal is just going to keep us where we are now. So that would obviously not be a wise investment. And the classic example is when we were doing the LTFP 6 months ago, I actually had High Street as one of the priority actions for renewal for 25-26. So now in our budget planning, we're postponing that because we need to understand how that fits into this urban design integrated framework.
Crash history too.
Oh.
So there's crash history.
Sharon wants to say something too.
And I think that's one of the things that I think especially, and I'll use Clark Road as a bit of an example, and how we've actually presented 12th Street as well, is that especially when we're actually talking about within that heart, it's how we actually frame those projects and get organising those things as to an interface, as to sit there and say, okay, it's going to be a combination of our renewal program, and with that upgrade and with potentially our open space program. It's how we actually consolidate the funds and the projects that we actually have within our existing plans and consolidate them and deliver them as one project, rather than sort of saying, oh, okay, well, I've got $7 million of renewal funding and I'll do, a little bit over here and a little bit over there and a little bit over here. Yes, there will still be a bit of that, but it's just that each year, out of what we've actually got from our renewal perspective, we just need to consolidate them into big projects without actually causing that grief, because that's where you're actually going to get the impact into, from a community perspective, to say that you're actually going to deliver. And the examples of what we actually used in this year's budget is 12th Street, Clark Road, and all that sort of stuff. So we just need to start building and thinking that sort of mindset when we actually go through the budget process and look at what's out of these key pedestrian areas and the key focal points, what is our major project going to be for that year, and bring them all together, as well as to how you're going to get the ground, rather than thinking it's indiscrete projects that are competing for the same amount of money.
On that map, There is I've noticed it before, and it's not something I usually highlight. We've actually had another fatality on Murray Street at the other end, at the South Bridge, and that was only within the last 2-3 years ago. So we've had two. I think, without wanting to emphasise, it's worth noting that because we now are literally killing the main street. So for some reason that didn't appear in the original report, but I think it needs to be put back in.
I suspect that's coming. So crash history at the moment is only, like the map there, we're current to the end of 2023 because it's based on the near maps data that we access through DIT. So if it happened anywhere sort of December 2023 on, that might not be captured. Otherwise, it may be one that's missing in their database and we'll have to check into it.
I have never heard any discussions, or I may have been too deaf to hear, about Gawler. The traffic is a nightmare, and people now, I was at a party on the weekend and with people from Hilliard Park. They've sold their car and they get the cab in because they're too scared to drive at Gawler because the traffic is bad. And two of the persons that used to work actually for the local government said, we just cannot understand that Gawler doesn't consider one-way streets. One-way streets were talked about at least 10 or 15 years ago. And then all of a sudden, it looked like it was in the too hard basket. And, you know, I hear you talk about High Street here. That's got to be a non-brainer with all the heritage walls and all that sort of stuff and so forth. What you'd ever do with this street here is just, you know, Elon Musk couldn't even fix it. You know, like, and Noddle and Donald. But the thing is with it, one-way streets will work. It's been proven by a fellow called Bob Walter many years ago. Some of the oldies would remember him. And for some reason or other, it never got up. And, you know, like a crossroad at the bottom of the bridge there to stop the traffic road, to allow it to go straight through, you know, to the Dead Man's Pass, you know, so forth. All of those things, they don't seem to be getting talked about anymore, and that sort of stuff, but the traffic flow is not going to increase. So what I've got before, I'll just say something about the truck the other day. And at that show, there were two truck drivers that I was at on the weekend. And one of them said to me, you know, you should give that man with the BW, triple or whatever it was, a medal. How he ever got to the point where he got. And you know what the words that he was saying is that whatever these things are that you look at, a truck driver looks at and tell you where to go, it finished at Finnis Street. It finished. His thing finished at Finnis Street. And he made a decision to take the next road right, which was up Finnis. And because another person had told him on the radio, when you get to the top of Finnis, go to your right, up Lindop Road, and you head out to Truro. That makes so much sense if you really think about it. But he thought, oh hell, there's an island there. I can't go over there, or whatever. So he did what he did, and a nasty situation. He also said he made a decision to go up Finnis Street because he looked up and saw that the road that went up the hill had no signage to do with the truckway. In other words, truck drivers follow by the road signs and that. We've got no signs. This town lacks so much signing, it's not funny. It's still a huge issue about parking and everything. But he wasn't going to take this big B-triple up there, you know, around Taylor and Corby and around that sort of thing. So he's going to be in a lot of trouble, but without a doubt, most of that was done because it's indicated that trucks are allowed to come in there because they have to go to Woolworths. Now with Audi and all the rest of it and so forth. You ever seen them go around the island at the street there? They go up and over it. So, you know, but we have to get the trucks in to unload the supplies. So Gawler is not the cowboy town it used to be with horse and cart. And one-way streets, I'm sure will work because motorists will, when they know there's only a one-way street, they're not going to come there. They're going to find their own way of going. It's a bit like the Eder Street fiasco. You know, if you shut a couple of streets off, they're not going to go down there. You know, we've got to make firm decisions, I believe, because Gawler cannot cope with with the traffic.
That was very well said, and you kind of stole my thunder a bit, Councillor Sample, because I was about to get all impassioned. So, can I have my moment of getting excited? Okay, right. So about 18 months ago, when we were talking about the UDF last time, I remember being up at that podium, and this is something that I'm really passionate about. So the main street of a town is something that will either make your town thrive or it will sink your town if you don't get it right. So look, let's just not make any bones about it. Our main street really, really struggles, and let's look at why we struggle. Because people don't want to come and they don't want to stay because of the traffic. And it has that circular effect, right? So we could put in the best cafes, we could put in the best shops, and I'm not saying that what's there isn't already absolutely awesome, but you could build more and more and more of that. But if people can't get in there and they can't stay there feeling safe, that it's easy to get a park, all the rest of those types of features, then the businesses can't thrive. On the reverse of that, if you have created the right traffic environment, more and more people come in, so businesses continue to thrive. That's the positive cycle we want to get ourselves into. So, we've got this terribly constrained main street. We've got a truck route that still comes down half of it to Lyndoch and then heads up the road. I had faster pasta with my children for lunch today, and in the 15 minutes, they were very fast, that we sat, waited for our food and then ate it, 10 bloody livestock trucks went up and down past us. And it is incredibly distracting and disturbing and smelly. And no wonder, people, avoid coming. It was also very noisy and they hurtle down Lyndoch Road. So we've got that truck issue. So we've got trucks coming through, so we need to advocate, we need to work very strongly with the state government in making sure that those bypasses that they're talking about through the Concordia and all the rest of the growth that's going to happen around us, that happens as a priority, right, is one of those absolutely major things. As staff, all we can do is provide information and advocacy at our officer levels. As council, that's stuff that, you can work up the political line. So that's that really important function of council in that in that, I shouldn't just say truck, in that heavy vehicle movement space. So Councillor Sample is absolutely correct though. No matter what, to have businesses, especially, larger chain businesses, you have to have trucks accessing the town centre, because otherwise how do they have their produce? Getting those movements right, again, so that, let's say we create a riverbank district on Julian Terrace, people don't want to go and sit there and have their lattes or cocktails or whatever because, every 5 minutes a bloody B-double's going to drive down. So that's another big consideration. We've got just limited actual road cross section to work with though as well, right? We've got Councillor Koch, would you like me to? Can I get to you when I finish having my excited bit? So we've got this constrained road geometry, not just on the main street, but on Julian Terrace, on Whitelet, on Todd, on Reed, on High Street, on Lyndoch. It is really rough. So, and we're not constrained by things that you can easily just go and knock down. We're actually constrained by beautiful heritage buildings that we want to maintain because they are part of that core heritage character that we want to be in the heart of our town. We've got a river on one end, a river on the extended other end, and a railway that we don't know what is going to happen with. So it's a cacophony of issues with traffic when it comes to our main street. The idea of one-way roads, the integrated traffic strategy certainly included some perspective on those. And indeed, when we were talking with the traffic engineers, they were like, oh, it's a bit brave to talk about one-way streets. I disagree. We need to, it's probably going to be a fundamental part of the solution, right? And again, I'm not going to hide it. When I was thinking about the concepts for what you might do with High Street, Councillor Sample, I'm 100% with you, it was going to be a largely one-way street. But when you make one street one way, what happens to the streets that connect to it?
Yeah, that's right.
So you can't just make a one street decision, which is why, really, do you want to... I'm sorry, I haven't got the clicker. I'm just getting very excited. All of these collection of traffic issues, and you know, and as we've just all been through this extended Edith Street challenge, it's not just the main street, it is the streets surrounding it that all come into this. And one decision has a ripple effect on everything. So the importance of trying to get it right, and again, there's never going to be a solution that's going to make everyone 100% happy. At the moment, we need to try and find a solution that's going to make, you know, let's aim high, 60% of people happy. But then they can grow, the rest can grow to accept it and see, oh no, actually, yeah, this is an improvement. Yes, please. Yeah, take the microphone.
Sorry, she wasn't a roll though. Going back to Councillor Koch's question before and sort of developing a bit further what Wendy said, it can look almost overwhelming when you look at the quantum of what you need to do, but I think one of the things we learned from doing the integrated transport strategy and the growth framework is that land use and transport have to be dealt with concurrently. And I think that's the lesson we're trying to present tonight in terms of looking at the town centre, which is basically a structure plan, not a review of the design framework. It's looking at whether you have more perimeter car parking and where you'd put it. It might be the one-way streets in some sections, and it's like Brian's actually been in our office and looked at our plans because High Street was one of those being possibly a one-way road. And I think one of the things you want to look at too is how do you prioritise and cost these things? So the integrated transport strategy had all these challenges and they're on that slide in front of you, but none of them are costed and there's no concepts against them. And I think that's what will provide you out of the rescope works. There'll be a costing. So the council can make a tactical decision. Do you want to spend $400,000 on Edith Street or do you want to spend $400,000 on High Street? You can make those tactical decisions based on where you think the greatest potential benefit is. And I'm not saying one's better than the other, but I think you need to have information in front of you to make those decisions. At the moment, you don't have that information. So I think that's probably the thing that's evolved in our thinking over the last 6 to 9 months, which is probably why I haven't been rushing to do the review of the design framework. I think that's that.
Yep, you talked about the trucks. Probably about 10 years ago, there was a proposal to take freight through Rosedale, but the problem was the weight limitation on the bridge. I mean, if you could lobby the state government to up the weight limit, you know, rebuild that bridge, it's actually quite tiny, you could actually get all the vehicles coming from Williamstown across at Sandy Creek and Lyndoch up to Gomershaw Road. And that's a short, I mean, I have concerns about Concordia when that's going to happen. That could be 10, 15, 20 years away. But that may be, if you lobbied, you might be able to actually get that to happen. Yep.
And if I can, as somebody who has a family member who brings heavy trucks through Gawler, they don't want to. They really do not want to. If there was any alternative, they do not want to bring livestock down through Williston, across the Williston Bridge, through Murray Street, up Lyndoch Road. So my suggestion, or his suggestion to me was, why don't we engage with the Heavy Vehicle Association? Because they're all for an alternative. So it's not just a Gawler problem. And I guess we keep talking about the delivery trucks to the businesses, but that's a small fraction of the trucks that we have. If we can work with with the truck drivers who really don't want to be here, but have no option at the moment, I think we have more strength in dealing with the state and federal government.
Oh, I completely agree. And I think if, you know, this is one of the things you need to do in this process is make sure we collect those ideas and work out how then we're going to actively, you know, advocate, work with, you know, our other government counterparts to try and do it. I mean, that idea of the Rosedale bypass, that's, I guess, theoretically a lot quicker than this still theoretical, but, you know, supposedly guaranteed Concordia bypass.
That Rosedale, that was slated probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, that's... I think... the last thing I wanted to say was... Actually, I wanted to say like 2 last things. One is, it's not... We need to create a main street where people can that they can come easily and they want to stay. And they want to stay because of the offerings, but because they feel safe, it's easy, it's all the rest of it. And that then creates the ongoing economic benefit. It's not just the road and the street, it's the footpaths, what you can put on the, what does the footpath width look like so you maximise, business opportunity, all of that. It's your lighting, and then it is all the rest of the, access, so, accessibility, cycling, public transport. And, Councillor Sample, your friends who have started catching the cab into town, that's actually really, really smart. But you know what? Imagine if they had a really easy access bus that they could hop on and off of, for example. So they didn't need to get a cab. It was just a bus, an easy bus route. So all of those are really important, and this integrated transport is important. The last thing I want to say is, we have invested many millions of dollars along the main street in civil infrastructure. So we also, where possible, don't want to just dig all of that up. So there is, we need to capitalise on what we have done and what is good and what can be built upon cost effectively. It would be, I think from a public funding perspective, the asset life on that street is another good 25 years. So yes, it's not doing it from volume or maybe what we want for town centre, but we don't also just want to dig it all up and have a lost investment. So that's another layer of thinking we need to have as well.
With that, what Councillor Hennessy and Councillor Koch said is exactly right, and it's just like this state government is not supporting local government, and they're putting the cart before the horse. Now, the biggest problem is all the cattle trucks and the sheep trucks, and the other day a B-double cattle truck came in from the Northern Territory, and I watched him go around the corner there. And on the weekend, the traffic lights were knocked over again. They were up there again today, putting them back up where the lady got killed.
Yep.
It's not going to stop until you put the link road from the Sturt Highway across to the Barossa Valley Highway. The plans have already been done. We saw them back here a couple of years ago. It might have been a bit longer than that and so forth. Concordia cannot go ahead until that road's in. Let's be really serious. We can't have a Concordia traffic end up in our town anymore now. So what Councillor Koch and Councillor Henny has said is talking about the truck drivers and all those sort of things. And Sacred Little Rosedale's got its heritage bridge. So they don't want to knock that down. They don't want to put another new one. So let's do the other one that will work for Concordia when it's developed and for the trucks now that are a problem. But in the state government, I am so critical. The big truck roundabout out at Rosedale has been remodelled 3 times to handle the trucks. Who's working there? Where'd they come from? Mars? I don't know. But we've got a huge truck industry in this country. Until that link road is done across there, and that's the only way to make it happen, Concordia can go ahead and the trucks will be very happy ever after. But unless you do that, and I wouldn't be for spending money on High Street, certainly not Edith Street, that's for sure, and so forth. But one-way streets, it was easy. The plans that council talked about back when I was mayor, it looked so good. One way around Julian Terrace, and I think it was 2-way for one portion, straight through across to the Dead Man's Path. High Street here, only one way from the top to the bottom. Murray Street, only one way from Walker Place to Lindock Road. Parking as it used to be, like Teddy Orward and everybody used to park like this all the way down the street. Twice as many cars to park there. It all looked fantastic. No money came available, so it was put in the bottom drawer, and it's in the bottom drawer now. So I think it's very hard because you as professional staff have got to look and say, well, how can we fix this bloody thing? It's a problem. But at the end of the day, some things you're not going to fix unless you put the horse back in front of the cart, because at the moment the cart's in front.
That brings us towards the end of the presentation. I said I'd do this in less than an hour. We might be close to 45. I guess when you look at what the rescoped structure plan and design framework, or delivery framework look like, there is a need to look at the land use vision. I think there's enough design principles in the UDF to basically stick with those to a large degree. But there is a need to look tactically at a range of issues. So we talked about the structure plan. If you go to the existing UDF, it refers to the structure plan that was done under the previous Development Act, which dates back to 1993. And that wasn't a structure plan anyway. That was simply just some very basic indications about certain activities that occurred. It was not really a structure plan. We do need to look at a whole lot of supporting infrastructure, which Wendy's talked about, laneways, footpaths, cycleways, and some of that might be one way, some of it may not be. Green spaces, landscaping. So the accessibility and mobility plan, I think, is the bit that makes the town function. We can talk about empty shops all we like, or about, you know, whether we could do with a better bakery, or in my pet one is always a whiskey distillery, which I still haven't got in town yet. But whatever businesses you want, you're not going to get it if you don't get the foundations right, I think, in terms of people and movement. So design guidelines, the transport vision, the draft code amendments. We never did code amendments under the old UDF, and therefore none of our vision actually came into the code. So there's no policies or provisions about, you know, what you may or may not do on key sites, or how you can coexist really important state heritage with appropriate new development. So it's that balance. And then the work plan, which is point 8. So I think there's several things we need to look at there, but I think having a quantity surveyor look at some indicative costings on priorities that Wendy's team can drive to deal with the issue of movement, because even the UDF said, look, we just can't deal with issues of speed and traffic movement because DIT, I might put DIT under the bus really, but DIT did say, look, it is what it is. And I think the problem is what it is not what we want or what we need. And I think it's not sustainable long term. We need to get that right. So I think we're all on the same page.
Thank you. I guess, you know, I've been watching the commentary for many years now. It's crazy how you hear the commentary when you're not an elected member, then when you are an elected member, it's the same commentary, but you start looking at it slightly different. And as you start working through your strategies, your visions that evolve, again, it's a different lens. I guess what I always find very interesting is what the problems are, and then where local government fits into what solutions we can actually technically offer, and how clear we have to be. You know, you touched on Cody's social media presence, which fantastic, especially more at recent times. But you know, some of those grenade posts he's doing and blowing up the internet has been an interesting experiment, because you know, we are seeing some of the comments going back. You know, we need more malls, we need more cafes, but we're not in the space on delivering a multi-level mall. We are, however, in the space of saying what our visions are and being open for business should we entertain, and I use them all as purely a example piece. So I understand the infrastructure delivery piece. I understand the data that we do need in and around it. I guess, and the thrive mentality, I'm really all about as well, because I completely agree. We don't get our Main Street right, people will keep on tolerating it until there's a bigger, better thing. And that bigger, better thing is just about to be built up at Concordia. That isn't designed around horse and car. It's designed around modern day service delivery. And I know I harped on about this before, but Salisbury and Mawson Lakes is a perfect example of what economic growth can be promoted in a neighbouring brand new suburb, and where another one sinks because of it. Now, Salisbury is licking its wounds, it's coming back, it's investing back into John Street and the like, but that's a reaction because its CBD got taken off of it. We can have that happen to us quite easily. So the problems we talk about, and we constantly do talk about it, you know, and I think it is something we need on our radar, are not new problems in this space by any means. So I guess my question would be, are we also not only looking inward, but are we looking outward in what main streets were actually do fit within our vision pieces? And I am seeing those nods. Where, like, are we physically actually going to these other main street CBD precincts that we see work and we see survive? And are we looking at the multi-level car parks, and are we looking at the one-way streets, and we're looking at what's comparative? And then are we talking to our counterparts in our local government networks of how did you guys get to that? Because sometimes I think we can isolate ourselves in local government of trying to solve a problem that is a problem for 68 councils, but we don't try to learn from each other's wins and losses. So yeah, does that making sense?
Yep, the answer is yes. So if you go back to the original brief, we did talk about doing benchmarking, and that's still in there. And in fact, I noticed the other day there was some announcements on, I think it's Jetty Road in Glenelg, where they're doing it in stages and doing a similar sort of thing to what we're talking about. So they're looking at that traffic and movement issue and how you get the place to work, because it's a bit tired in places and lacking tree canopy, and there's always conflicts, same issues we've got. So the answer is yes, we have to learn from other people. We can't just look inwards, we're going to have to look outwards, because there's plenty of easy answers out there as to how to do stuff, just like Brian talked about with some of the road scenarios. We don't have to be that innovative, we just need to adapt the right ideas that suit our environment.
Thank you. It's a great presentation, and several of them jump out, and yeah, the access and mobility and that really starts to make sense now. We really need to get that in place. But just for my benefit, perhaps, can we distill down, so we had $35,000 in this budget. So what's happening to that? And I'm thinking, therefore, it's going to get morphed into something for the next financial budget. Could you just give us some clarity so that we've got that distilled down?
Through the chair. So yes, the answer would be the $35,000 would be returned to the budget for this year. I guess there was always that almost presupposition that we'd have the balance of the money next financial year, the 70 or so thousand. But given where we are, we think that we should put in probably up to $30,000 or $40,000 for the traffic modelling that needs to be done, the costings. And I think we just need to come back with a completely clean budget in one financial year, which basically gets it done. So my view is we've done, if you like, the integrated transport strategy, we've done the growth framework, and the colour structure plan will take care of itself once we've got some clarity on GARP from government in March. This is the last major strategic project we need to deliver for the town. Yes, there are structure plans and master plans of reserves and the like, but at the big picture level, this is the last one, but it's probably the existential one, the one we always needed to do. But yeah, so we'll come back with an updated costing.
Just quickly, Andrew, you said that GARP will come back in March. Is there any indication of what's going to happen? Because we spent a lot of time on our plan and we took it to the government. And in fact, I was under the assumption that we'd actually had spoken to the government about what we were going to do, and they were, notionally okay with it. And then we give it to them, and what comes back is, one of our members said we've been screwed. So, from my understanding, the Cuddler people aren't happy. So, although we've done, I get concerned that we've done all this work and it's for naught, because what the government wants is Monopara, basically to the river, and what we wanted was something else. So I'm very, very concerned that we basically wasted our money.
Through the chair. The process of how this will work with government is ultimately that the Commission have reviewed the feedback. That was from ourselves, from Gawler residents, from Tony Piccolo, amongst others. I did speak to staff within the Commission who are running around doing various updates at the moment as we speak. But it still has to go through Cabinet, so I'm not going to be able to share exactly what those changes are, because I haven't seen them for a start. I've only got sort of, some brief indications that, you know, there might be some refinements. I can't tell you exactly what those refinements are going to look like, but it's fair to say that we put a fairly strong case forward, both in terms of the growth framework and in terms of our submission on GARP. And I'm fairly confident we'll see some refinement to what you saw in the draft GARP. But what that looks like, I can't tell you today. So what we did wasn't a waste of time, because I think you'll find it will make a difference. But I can't get into the specifics of it just yet.
Okay. I'll look forward to March.
Thanks, Wendy and Andrew, for the presentation. Just a question about the slide that's up at the moment. So when these are rescoped, and you know we've got, you know, we're kind of there at the, I guess, the starting point of implementing these actions. Do you see some of these points being done concurrently? Do you see them sort of happening one by one? Like, I guess if we were to lay out, obviously, you know, without making any promises, I guess what's sort of your vision from here, or steps forward you see once I guess the rescoping's completed?
Yeah, I think a number of stages would have to be done concurrently. If you're doing this in 12 months, I think you would do in parallel the land use point 1 with probably the access and mobility plan, point 4. I think once you get 1 and 4 done, that gives you the answer to 3, which is the structure plan. I think we can largely recycle some of the principles and objectives out of the UDF from 2016 without reinventing the wheel, because I think fundamentally there's some good stuff in there. I think it was just a concern that it got to version 16 before it got adopted, and some of the vision there was probably a bit, you know, watered down a little bit. But I understand why, and that's fine. A different era, different view of the world. And I think from there, some of the bits like code amendments and the work plan will just fall out of that. So we'll definitely have to do it in parallel, and we'll come up with a work plan as to how we deliver that within 12 months.
Thank you. Yeah, this all looks good. Yeah, as the culprit who's been throwing grenades, I think there's value in just looking at just the questions of those general questions that aren't necessarily about what council can do, but about how people feel about what's happening, you know, because sometimes people say things like, oh, I wish the shops were open longer or open on Sundays or whatever, and obviously that's not council business directly, but it does reflect it's 3 levels down from the actual problem, and is a symptom that reflects an issue with the structure of our main street, you know, and that sort of thing fundamentally, and our road network and everything. But yeah, I just think like a big step, I think, for us is just being on the same page as a council and as a community as well. Because fundamentally, the role of the staff can present things to us, and the CEO can advocate on our behalf with MPs and that sort of thing. But in terms of what the governments will most listen to, it's the community there. And if we, as the you know, the public relations, the free public relations department for the council, you know, can actually get our message across of what are the things that the state government could be doing, what are the things the council could be doing, what are the things that we need to work out with the truck drivers, and just have that clear, and we can communicate that. I think that just really helps us be able to, you know, get across something like being able to say this bypass is a priority or whatever. If it's not just the council saying it, but it's the community saying it because they understand all the steps leading up to it. That was just my comment.
I think we'll wrap up the debate now. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.